You got a battery? It's not in properly.
Test.
We don't need a second.
Anyway, welcome to the Planning and Development Committee meeting at Toowoomba Regional Council. This meeting is open to the public and will also be live streamed. I would like to thank those of you who are in the room with us today and acknowledge anyone watching the Council's social media channels. Remind councillors to click join meeting on board view. I'd open the meeting with knowledge to the traditional owners. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today. The Western Waka Waka and the Gayabo and the Jarawar peoples, and pay respects to their elders past and present and emerging for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's first people. Attendance and apologies. I believe Carol Taylor won't be his apology. Okay. Oh, leave of absence, sorry, it's there. And Kerry Shine, no resolution required. And declaration of prescribed interest. I believe, Jeff, you have a...
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much. I do have for item number 3, which is the CBD Heritage Incentive Policy, consideration of one application. I request that it be minuted that I declared a declarable conflict of interest in relation to a similar matter at the Planning and Development Committee meeting 7 December 2021. Item number 3, 2.41 CBD Heritage Incentive Policy, consideration of one application, and of Council's decision to allow me to participate in a decision about the matter, including by voting on the matter. As the relevant circumstances have not changed since that time, I will participate in a decision about the matter, including by voting on the matter. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, Tim?
Thanks, Chair. Colleagues, I just want to bring your attention to the Regional Development Statistics Report. I did raise this last time, but a party on my register of interest that I gain an income from is under the list of ministerial infrastructure designations. It was on there before, probably on there, and whilst I appreciate the MID report, GM coming, it'll probably be on there from now until forever. And I'm really hoping I don't have to declare a conflict every month at this stage. So that's for noting, and I'd just like it to be noted that I did declare that, and I probably won't see the need to do it every month from now on, but that's I think all I need to do in that regard. Thank you.
Is there any other conflicts? No? So, Councillor McDonald, has anyone got any objections to him staying in the room? No. Yeah, you're staying.
No, mine was, it was already declared.
Yeah.
And the relevant circumstances haven't changed, so okay. We don't need to vote on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. The CBD Heritage Incentives Policy, consideration of one application. Author is Stephen Keys. Okay, I'll hand to Nicola.
Thank you very much, and through the chair. So this is the first application we've received in relation to the CBD Heritage Incentives Policy. So this policy was established by Council to provide grants to financially assist owners of heritage-listed buildings to undertake works that will improve the appearance of the Main Street environment. So we received an application for $10,000 of the $60,000 for this financial year, and we provided some pictures for you for 86 Yandilla Street in Pittsworth. So they'll be looking to renovate that awning on a shop which was built in the early 1900s. So they have certainly met the criteria for the funding, and this is the first that we've received for this financial year. So there's still $50,000 available should council approve this particular application. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Tim? Sorry.
Well, I think it's a great use of a policy such as this, and I'm happy to move it.
Second it, Melissa. Do we need to go into debate? Is there any further comments that we can now vote on the motion? All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? The motion carried. All right, we now go to item 5, the proposed temporary local planning instrument, 01. 4, is it?
Charges resolution.
Oh, item 4, sorry. The council adopted charges resolution number 6, attachment 2, to take effect on the 10th of December 2024.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this is a very minor change to our infrastructure charges resolution. As councillors are aware, we're addressing some deficiencies within the charges resolution, but that will happen. So there'll be some major changes in March, April meeting, and that will be consistent as well when we bring up any incentives policies, because the two have to link together. So this is a very minor change. So the state has increased the cap that local governments can charge, and you'll remember that infrastructure charges, the difference between what we are allowed to charge and also the actual cost of delivering trunk infrastructure. So the state lifted the cap by 6%, so consistent with inflation. They did that either in July or August. So this is merely so that council can charge at that new maximum cap. Council was already charging at the maximum cap allowed. So this is really just following that that lift by the state in what councils can charge. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Just raising something here. Certain persons emailed me regarding something. The cost to create a new non-residential lot in Brisbane is $34K, whereas charges resolution number 6 seeks to charge $123K from an already high figure of $109K in Toowoomba to create a lot. It is not feasible or in Toowoomba's economic interest to be charging 300% more than Brisbane. Can somebody answer that, please?
Thank you. I'm happy to take that question. So many councils will lift their fees. So this is a one-off lift of fees by 6% across the board. Some councils choose to not lift fees, and I'll use Bundaberg as an example because of the press that they've had recently. So Bundaberg Council had chosen not to lift its fees for a period of time to the maximum cap. They've obviously ended up in some financial difficulties because of the cost of infrastructure, and I understand it did go back to council recently, and they've listed their fees in line with the cap. So there, literally, this is just a generalised increase in all fees. I can't speak to why Brisbane Council would set a different fee for that one line item if that is the case. I only received that email this morning, so I haven't looked into it. We can look into it further. So if this is approved today, we can provide some comments and certainly look at that for the March, April. However, we have to be cognizant of the fact that these are fees applying just like rates to everyone that would pay a fee. So we're not picking out any one particular line item for the purposes of this report. It may well be that council decides to do an incentives policy to reduce a fee, for example, and it may well be that's what Brisbane Council did for that line item fee. I haven't had time to actually look into it, but it could be something that council might choose to waive a fee or reduce a fee just for a particular line item, as we do for, say, townships and those types of things. So it's a different, and that would be part of the strategic intent of council, including in terms of advancing economic development.
So if we move this and it gets passed today, and then you come back and say, well, Brisbane City Council is doing this because of X, Y, Z, that part of the resolution today could be changed later?
Thank you. What I haven't looked at what Brisbane City Council is doing for just that one fee. It may well be that it's the fees are reduced because of some sort of incentives policies. We have similar incentives policies for different fees, and it would be a matter for council to look at whether we think that situation applies here and whether we should reduce the fees for any particular line item. And we do that as part of our incentives policies, which is why with those policies, they work in conjunction with the infrastructure charges resolution. But I think just to reduce a line item today based on an email where we've been unable to do any sort of further knowledge.
I understand that we need to do our own research. I totally get that. But the thing is, we're in a housing crisis. Land is scarce enough and land is dear enough. This has to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're happy to do that, taking into account affordability for council as well. We can bring that information back to council.
Any other? Councillor Jep?
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks, Chair. Just so clarification, Dr. Nicola, this is the cap that's been increased by the state government, and therefore we have the opportunity to go to that cap, which we have in the past, and we've spoken ad nauseum around the gap that we have of what we can charge to what it's costing council in regard to some of this infrastructure. So it makes perfect sense to do exactly what we're doing, which is in line, and it may have been a little bit of a delay to get to this point from when the state made it to when we have done it, but we are moving to that point. It would be useful perhaps between now and next week to have an example of the non-residential, just to see what that actually looks like on a couple of properties that have gone in the past, and what it potentially could be, noting the figures are a figure and per square metre or whatever it may be, sometimes looks a little different to what it actually is on the ground. I'd find that useful if we could have something between now and next week, just to give clarity and surety to councillors of what we're doing. But we have gone to the cap of what the state government has allowed all local governments to do, and nothing further than that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor, and through the chair. One of the issues with our current infrastructure charges policy, and it's something that we will be adding next time. For other local governments, each time there's a raise, they already have it automatically in the infrastructure charges policies that they don't have to come back to council. We were actually going to fix this time, but we won't fix it till, say, March, April. So for a lot of local governments, they don't come back. It's just inherent in the policy is that you just lift as the state lifts.
Councillor Ronoff?
Thank you, Chair. All councillors received the email to which Councillor Manteiffel was referring to, and I guess what it brought to my mind was we are in competition with the whole of southeast Queensland to attract and retain business, and this has only just come to us, and I take into account what you have also said, GM Nicola, but I don't want us not to be competitive, I guess, is my concern. And in light of this information, which does mark a huge difference, I would like us to have a little bit more time just to consider what the implications are for that, and if it is as reasonable as we might think it is to charge this cap, or are we in fact doing ourselves out of attracting business? That's the concern that I have in light of this, and I appreciate that we can always come back, but it is hard, and it also I want us to hear from the industry when they tell us something like this. So what would be the harm in deferring it until the ordinary meeting, I suppose, so that we have the opportunity to just consider this information a little bit more. Is there, through you, Chair, to the General Manager, would there be any harm or impact in deferring until the ordinary meeting so that we can have a little bit more of a think and some more information about how this difference in the infrastructure charges resolution holds Toowoomba compared to places such as Brisbane?
Nick, do you want to speak on it? Nick.
Thank you. I was just trying to Google to see if Brisbane has a particular incentives policy for these types of lots. So we can bring it. I'm happy to bring it back to ordinary and provide some information as to why. We can actually reach out to Brisbane and see why, because it may be that this is something that they've highlighted through their research in terms of incentives policies, and it could well be that you want to pull this out for the ordinary meeting. So that's not an issue at all. We'll just do a quick summary of what we can see and perhaps look at some comparators.
Okay, thank you. Chair, there might be other questions, but in light of that information, I'd actually propose an alternate recommendation, which is that Council defer. There you go. Wendy the Wizard. Thank you, Wendy. Just until next week so that we can understand both the difference in charges, but also there's points made here about when the charges actually are levied as well. So I think, General Manager, you've got all of that information as well. Thank you.
Councillor Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Pardon me. Through you to Nicola. Nicola, it'd be, it's probably not so much a question, but I reckon we need to be cognizant of the fact that all things aren't equal in comparing apples for apples. We're not comparing apples for apples here necessarily with Brisbane, considering their geographic area, the possibility around infrastructure availability, all those sorts of things. I concur with Councillor Jeff that this is a cap and there's no such thing as full cost recovery. That's why we've got a cap, so that we can't fully cost recover. And this is a gap that I'd remind us all of, that the general rate base subsidises. So whilst we may be looking at other areas, I think we need to be mindful and cognizant of what our situation is. Very different situation in as much our expansion area and the shortage of infrastructure, and we've known for possibly ever since amalgamation really, that the pressures on our budget will come from these greenfield areas rather than brownfield infill. So I think all things equal, we've got to run our race here according to what our environment and rate base size is and our affordability as well. So there's a whole raft of other things that come into this around affordability as well. So just a comment, I think I'd like to see some balanced information come back.
I'm sure. Thank you very much, Councillor Bill. So we levy the charge, and it's for the use of capacity within networks. So whether it's residential or non-residential, it will still use capacity, for example, roads, etc. I've just reached out to the team and just asked if we could get a set of 6 as a comparator, but also to look into Brisbane City Council to see if there was a resolution or an incentives policy of some kind where they've specifically targeted this type of arrangement. So it may well be that from ordinary, you impose the charge, but we develop an incentives policy that's time limited, where charges are reduced or those types of things. But I'll be able to provide more information for you in time for ordinary. And if you're happy, I'll share that information before the meeting.
Councillor Trevor.
I'd like to second that motion that's up on the board there.
Just second it. Do we need to go into do? No. All those in favour, raise your hands. All those against? All right, the motion is carried. Nicole,
Thank you very much, and through the chair. So this report is and draft TLPI is put to council for consideration, and it follows a motion at the ordinary meeting of the 17th of September 2024. We've taken the councillors through some council information sessions about this particular proposed instrument. So I'm happy to open up to any questions that you may have.
Councillor Tim.
Nicola, is it your office's recommendation that this report, these recommendations here, is that how it's working?
Oh, thank you, Councillor Tim. So our recommendation is merely that we commit it to council to consider whether you wish to approve it or not. The second recommendation is also for council to consider whether you make it retrospective, so it would go back to the date of September 17. And then the third recommendation, should you decide to approve it, is that the materials be prepared and it's be submitted to the state.
Okay, so your officers are not taking a position, you're just putting it to us.
Yes, so we're happy for, I mean, it's a matter for councillors to decide whether they wish to approve it or not approve it, or if you want any changes, those types of things.
Thanks for that, Chair. If I could, I've put a alternate motion through to the council business alternative motion button here, and I wonder if that could be brought up, please. It's also in an email, Wendy, this morning. Getting there? Thanks very much. So, colleagues, if I have a seconder, I'm happy to speak to it, but I will read the motion that council not proceed with the TLPI at this stage, that B, authorise the Chief Executive Officer or delegate to undertake an investigation into the management of significant vegetation in the region, and C, based on the outcomes of that investigation and consultation with interested stakeholders, bring a report back to council containing recommendations to manage that vegetation with a view to minimising loss to vegetation. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say any more without a seconder, Chair.
Edwina, sorry.
I'm happy to second that motion.
Do you mind if I talk to it, Chair?
Yes. Yeah. Tim, you're first, I guess.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Happy to talk to these councillors. I think we have it on our books, the idea that we are creating a TLPI, and that's what we're voting on today. I simply think that we're not at the stage to be setting up a TLPI and sending it straight forward at this particular time, and that we really haven't, as a council, done our homework and looked at the best possible option for this to go through at this stage. If we, colleagues, look at what it takes to send a TLPI through, it contains that the Planning Act requires it to do three things. Now, you have to bear with me because so, colleagues, it must say that there is a significant risk to serious adverse cultural, economic or environmental conditions. happening in the local government area. So obviously what we're trying to do is to mitigate significant environmental risk happening in an area. To put it simply, we don't have the evidence to suggest that at this point in time that's happening, and nothing on council's books can help us do that. So how we prove a significant environmental risk is by looking at mapping and looking at mapping changes over time. Now, council is in possession of a 2020 Red Leaf report. We do have, as was presented to council in an information session last week, a 2023 report. However, that's got to go through a fair bit of officer work, time and effort to get it to the point where it's usable in this position. So at present, we were looking to send something to a minister that proves that we have significant risk of environmental harm happening, and I don't think we have the evidence to support that at this stage. The other idea that it must not adversely affect the state interests is of importance here. We have had a change in government in the last month. I note that when this first came to council in September, there were 5 TLPIs in Queensland, one of them concerning the Arundel Hills Golf Club in the Gold Coast. And as a matter of urgency, within the first 2 weeks of office, the new state government took a very keen eye and have their hands all over that. With their housing targets that they've set, I think would be very hard pushed to get this to be at present in line with the state government's interests. So I feel like if we continue down this road of a TLPI for those 2 reasons, we're not going to have the evidence that we need to give the state government and the minister a functioning TLPI for Toowoomba region. And I really think that we haven't done our homework yet. We haven't got our eggs in a row, ducks in a row, to be able to do this properly. So, colleagues, my motion is that we authorise the CEO or delegate and the planning staff to really look at an investigation into the management of significant vegetation. Now, colleagues, this doesn't have a timeline, but it's important that they get this work done properly. Now, I know we have a planning scheme coming and I know we have delays, and the idea of this honourably was to bridge that gap between now and the planning scheme that we're happening. But I really would like our officers to be able to do that. Now, there are funding and there are time restraints, but I really think if we're going to do anything, that level of investigation by officers has to happen at a proper level. Based on that, I'd like them to bring a report back to council. And if they bring that report back to council, there are many options they can go through. They can put a temporary local planning instrument back on the table because it's paused at this stage. They can look at, it's not a waste of time because there's a new planning scheme coming by the time the work's done. And they might look at overlays or other options. There are simply other ways to manage this. And I think that at present, we haven't done any consultation. We've rushed this through and get it done. We've had phone calls from all sides of the community around lack of consultation, and that's why I put consultation with interested stakeholders. So I'd say, colleagues, I think the idea to create a TLPI is honourable, and I'm not against the idea, but I really think that in line with the way our council is situated at this point in time, we're not in the correct place to write a TLPI. So, Chair, I won't go into debate. I'll leave that at the right time. But, colleagues, that's the motion before you, and happy to take questions, happy to work with outcomes that are happy for everyone. Thank you.
Councillor Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I initially had a question before the mover of the motion spoke to it, but anyway, I'll ask it now. Through you to Nicola. Nicola, please educate me, but I was of the opinion that it wasn't up for the officer to decide, for council to decide whether we would go ahead with this or not, because the previous decision of council was a directive by majority for officers to develop a TLPI to present, point 1, in the background, develop a temporary local planning instrument with the intent of protecting vegetation, blah, blah, blah. Pursuant, point 2, pursuant to the provisions of the Act, Minister's guidelines, temporary local planning. So I don't know. I thought there was a clear enough directive by majority for us to be presented, the TLPI, to vote on whether we wanted it to go forward or not here by majority, not what officers thought about how they should bring it back.
Absolutely, through the chair, and that's why we are not making a recommendation or not. We've followed the resolution. A TLPI has been drafted per that resolution, and then probably the only other decision you would have to make today, if you want to approve that TLPI, is consistent with recommendation 2, and that is whether you make it retrospective, so you take it back to September 17. So you are absolutely correct. It is not a decision for council officers.
But no, I totally agree. I took this from the intent of that directive that you were to present a piece of work here today, not for council. It was a foregone. We decided that we wanted a TLPI put in place, ready to be ratified today, to send off to the minister, not anything else. That was my interpretation.
Absolutely. The only thing is with obviously legal consultation, it's around that, do you make it retrospective or not? Part of the reasoning to make it retrospective is you've got to demonstrate urgency. But it is not a decision of council officers, which is why we have not said we recommend you approve it or we recommend you refuse it or anything else. It's written exactly as it should be, and that is it's a matter for council laws.
Thank you.
Councillor Trevor.
Just with the motion that's up on the board there, obviously what that basically means is TRC is doing their due diligence on that motion. Every due diligence clause I've ever come across has a timeline to the acting CEO or to GM Nicola. What would be an appropriate timeline or a date that you guys come back with something?
So we have some mapping from 2020. You've seen the most recent mapping, and as part of that session, I think the council officers, which is across council, said they probably needed another 6 months to clean the data and interrogate it. So what you saw were sort of blobs that hadn't been fully tested. So I would probably anticipate six months if we rely on the processes in place to test the existing data, unless you want to resource it up, put a small team together and have them just work on cleaning the data for the mapping. So we've got mapping, but you saw the councillors are aware of the issues with the mapping.
So you're basically saying next May, June-ish?
With the current, if you don't have a small team of staff pulled off their existing roles and focusing just on this, then it would probably be May, June, because the mapping is done by a different team. And then, as was said, to make sure that mapping is accurate, it will take a person travelling around each day in Toowoomba looking at what's shown in the mapping. So you did see that some cars were considered to be trees. So it was really just that first pass for the most recent mapping. But if resources, as in people and money, are not devoted to it, I would say 6 months, because it would be part of the work that they're continuing to do at the moment.
Because with the current motion up there, it's just so open-ended that it could mean 2027. That's just my interpretation of that. Decent motion. A timeline at least.
Councillor Rebecca.
Thanks, Chair. Well, while the mover of the motion considers Councillor Mantiple's question, I'd like to foreshadow that should this motion fail, I move the officer's recommendation with an amendment that instead of impact assessment, the TLPI becomes code assessable. And the previous speaker's question has really, I think, highlighted that we don't have enough information on this issue, and that it would be preferable to methodically work through the officer's recommendation. We can, if the officer's recommendation is not supported by councillors, be that as it may, But this, what we're considering here, this is undercooked, and councillors will have the opportunity to vote either in favour or against the original officer's recommendation. So I just think that that's a more methodical way to move through this. So I foreshadow that I'll be moving, should this fail, the officer's recommendation with that amendment from impact to code accessible.
Thank you. I might respond to that. I would need to get legal advice around that from an expert in planning law. We'd be in terms of the wording of that motion from impact to code. My preference is that I would be able to get you that advice before you moved a motion which had relevance in terms of the Planning Act.
Would that be able to be attained before the ordinary meeting next Tuesday?
Yes, it could.
Thank you.
Councillor James.
Thanks, Chair. It's probably the position's probably passed, but I just wanted to go back because just the process we're sort of going through, because I know there's obviously we've got a couple of different potential motions on the board here, and obviously in many ways it's sort of trying to achieve the same outcome in regards to obviously the intent of what we're attempting to do. But I just wanted to check, because I know the interesting point with this is Councillor Carl sort of pointed out before, like the intent or what the thought was around the original motion as to why we landed here, and whether it was around the understanding of to arrive to a point of presenting the TLPI, or if it was more around that we took the steps towards going in that direction. And the reason I ask that is because I clearly remember in debate when we had it last time, and I was in favour of obviously going the direction that we went, and Councillor McMahon, I think, was sort of questioning me, sort of saying, by doing this, we're committing to going to a TLPI. And I specifically asked the question, as I was told, no, that wasn't committing us to going to a TLPI, but what it was doing was, like what we've talked about here, going through the due diligence of how or what is the best way to go forward. Because I clearly asked that, because that was a clear point in when I made the decision on how I voted. Because Tim, I remember, I watched, that's what he said when I was speaking, and we sort of went back and forth a bit with that, said, no, this isn't, is this a commitment to a TLPI, or is this a commitment that we take the steps forward which would then take in the processes that we've gone through to get to where we've landed?
Thank you, and through the chair. So the wording, the way the resolution is worded, it's committed you to a TLPI. The process, and what may not have been well understood is the process for a TLPI. You've got to demonstrate it's urgent, which in part sets aside the community consultation or the stakeholder consultation or the landowner consultation, etc. So that's why that September meeting was classed as the only consultation you needed. But no, the wording of that resolution is specific in that you committed to a TLPI and you committed for council officers to submit it. So the issue today is part of that urgency to demonstrate is that the need to make it retrospective back to September the 17, because we need to put a date on the TLPI that councillors want that to take effect. But but the wording of the resolution is specific in that you have resolved to develop a very specific TLPI and that it be submitted to the state for consideration.
Councillor Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Nicola, I just want to raise something with you. To quote you, you just said we would need to resource this up. Back when the majority of council give a directive, there's a saying that comes to mind by a well-known person by the name of Stephen Covey, and his quote is, "First things first." When there was a directive, and given the discussion and debate and urgency, in my view, around this matter, because first things first, the majority of council felt there's a potential gap between now and when the planning scheme hits the deck. So it's not my position how to tell you how to organise your work crew, your business unit, but I am disappointed that given the length of discussion and debate that there wasn't more priority given to research this and resource this and put a request in or reshuffle, considering the timeline. If we were to put a Gantt chart up on the board there now, with how this TLPI falls into that work process, I would have thought that would have been pretty clear that it would have been an urgent piece of work to fill the gap, given the delays that are in front of the planning scheme. I'm being honest and open. I'm disappointed that this wasn't given priority, given that it was a stepping stone to us arriving, and there's a 2-year limit on a TLPI, and it was an interim measure. And if you look in the issues and responses, it clearly steps out the other stages around veg management and a whole raft of things that the planning scheme then comes along and picks up. And in the meantime, we've afforded some protection. And I won't go into debate now about evidence, but I'll reserve that to debate time. But I really am. I would have thought a majority directive from council was a priority.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'm happy to respond. So generally with the TLPI, if you're moving that as a resolution, you would have the evidence first. This was moved without input from planning, including legal input. If we were aware of it, we would have essentially set up the session that we set up following. So it's not a matter for council officers post hoc to try and find evidence to support something that's already resolved. We did take staff off what they were doing for the Toowoomba Region's planning scheme. I took funding out of a budget just to get this done today. So I don't think that if you pass a resolution that requires evidence, I don't think it's reasonable to expect staff then to set aside their work duties to try and gather evidence post hoc.
Thank you for the response. I respectfully have to disagree, because there are many things and directives that council gives across the business of council, across all of the directorates, where there is a prioritisation. Let me remind us all of a roads network structure that we brought in. There wasn't any technical research about that, but it got priority and resources were directed. I'm just merely saying that, you know, I would have thought this is a natural progression, given the intent and spirit of why the TLPI was put on the table, to afford that gap period, which this report talks about in the issues and responses.
Thank you. I'm happy to respond. I think in other situations, you're not required to have the evidence before you move a motion. With this particular type of legal planning tool, you should come to it with the evidence, because that's the basis of saying to the state, we've got this evidence and it's so urgent, it must happen now. That didn't happen. So trying to find evidence after, and I think probably even discussing it here makes it really clear that there was no evidence to support this at that time. But to want council officers, this isn't a funded project, it's not a resource project, but I think to expect council officers to set aside the work that they're doing to try and gather evidence after the fact, I don't consider that to be a reasonable expectation.
Last question, Trevor.
Thank you, Chair. Getting back on track here, can you explain for everyone in this room, or probably GM Nicola, probably the best, or CEO, and everybody listening online or viewing online, what is the difference between impact assessment and code assessment?
Oh, thank you. So just on a general basis, impact assessment is much more rigorous and robust, and generally requires community consultation, public notification periods, etc. And then it usually attracts a much lengthier term for approval. For code assessable, they're your sort of day-to-day things. They're much easier and much more timely to have approved and or refused.
Thank you.
I think we put Tim's... Oh.
Thanks, Chair. Just in regard to the motion that's before us, I'm wondering the term, through to you, Tim, if I could, significant vegetation as opposed to what's been spoken about, ecological significance, whether is that something that needs to reference ecological significance?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Look, if you'd be more happy with that word, but I think significant covers all types of significant vegetation. But if it wanted to be ecologically significant, I don't have a problem with that being added in. But I also don't overly see the need. Dr. Nicola, do you have any evidence on whether that helps?
Thank you. I'm not sure if there is any meaning given to the two different terms, so I'm probably not well placed to advise unless you make it broader and include reference to both terms, and or because there may be a very defined term for, say, ecological significance versus significant vegetation.
Yeah, happy to do that. I just kind of wanted an umbrella term with that, so I don't list a category and miss one. I just wanted all significant vegetation in your investigation.
I think significant vegetation, because then you can define what is significant for this region, and it might be things that you do or don't value, or it might be particularly rare or unusual trees, that type. So I think significant vegetation may sum it up quite nicely. Ecologically significant would be a limiter, I would say.
That's fine. I just wanted to get clarification with Tim, because all the other motions we talk about areas of ecological significance. I just want to make sure you're clear on what you actually want.
Thanks, Mayor. Through the chair, though, while I'm holding the mic, Dr. Nicola, do you have any issues on putting a 6-month time frame on part 2? And also perhaps part 3, rather, report back to council by June 2025?
Thank you. No issues. And I'm happy if it says report back by that date at latest, if in the event that we are able to do the work more quickly.
Thanks for the input on that. So, Wendy, if I could please, item 3, based on the outcomes and consultation with interested stakeholders, bring a report back to council by June 2025 at the latest. Bring a report to council, don't worry about the 10, just the month is fine, I think. On or before June 2020. So bring a report back to council on or before.
Have a mover and a seconder for this. Do we need to go to debate? Yeah.
Oh, hang on, I've got to...
Oh, okay.
Just before we go to debate, sorry, Chair, just the word, sorry, by or before. So as it's on the meter debate, I'll reserve my right. Thank you, Chair.
Speaker against?
Thanks, Chair, through you. So again, I reiterate that councillors have the opportunity to go through the detail of the officer's recommendation. And there's a lot of stuff in there that I would like the opportunity to discuss with councillors, but we are where we are. So I just, in response to this and some of the comments that's been made, I'll address them sort of item by item. The first is in regard to the evidence that the General Manager referenced. And it is a fact that the GIS team has been working on mapping vegetation for months and months and months. The fact that that only came to light a week and a half ago is probably a matter internally for the CEO and the General Manager to work through. But it is a statement of fact that the GIS team has been working on vegetation mapping for months and months and months. The idea that there needs to be 6 months of officers' time to dissect and disseminate that mapping is flawed on several levels, but it also is such a limited way of thinking, because we have also spoken in this room about other local government areas that are using AI to fly through understanding vegetation mapping. Other local government areas are doing this, and it is not taking 6 months. It is a process that feeds into itself and speeds up, and you get inputs and then outputs over days, not weeks or months. And we were told that that sounds great and that they'd look into it, but it doesn't sound like there's been action on that. And I'd also say that it's actually preposterous to propose that councillors bring to a meeting evidence of geospatial mapping. It is preposterous. Our role as elected representatives is to signal the intent of the will of the council. And then we have subject matter experts who are officers within the council that then act on those directives. The best that we could do as elected reps in terms of bringing forward evidence is to bring forward some photos of developments where century-old trees have been knocked down. We could do that. I mean, we've all seen them, but we could do that. I also want to talk about this idea of consultation and the fact that it's been said that there hasn't been consultation. Specifically, since this TLPI motion was moved in September, there's been 2 meetings with UDIA where it's been on the agenda. There's been no engagement with the Darling Downs Environment Council on it. But bigger picture, it is such a falsehood to say that there hasn't been consultation. Councillors, there's been 14 years of consultation. This mapping has been in place since 2012. The planning scheme has been in place since 2012. And before it was brought in, there was public consultation done. So it's closer to 15 or 16 years that this has been an issue for this council that we haven't acted on. So I again flag that we've got another motion here that we can work through. But the idea that we've got time is again another falsehood, because no, we don't. We've sat here when DAs have come to this council and we have wrung our hands when the proposal is to knock down every single tree in that DA. We've wrung our hands and said, this is not what the community wants, this is not what our council wants, but what can we do? Well, this is what we can do. Right today is what we can do. There's also been concerns raised that we haven't got the evidence to bring to the minister, and that the minister, we're putting ourselves in the minds of the minister. And I can tell you with certainty that Minister Blay is an experienced state member with an experienced team, and it is up to him to determine the merits of the TLPI. It's not for us here to try to get into the legal minds of the minister, whose job it is to approve or not. Again, I come back to the fact that it is our job to show intent. It's our job to show intent. And so when we sit here and we do this work, this is the tough thing about what we do in this room. We have 2 options. We either support or we oppose. There's no grey area allowed for in that. So when we support that we do not proceed with a temporary local planning instrument that protects ecological significance, we are saying that this is a council that is opposed. This is a council that is opposed to protecting areas of ecological significance. I really want everybody to think about that. Is this a council that wants that reputation of we are a council that is opposed to protecting areas that are known, mapped, identified as having ecological significance? And I know what it is like to sit here and be in two minds about motions. And, you know, in a minute or two's time, we're going to vote on this. And I know how I'm going to vote, and I know that I'm going to have my head held high about how I vote. And I know that when other DAs come before us in months and years down the track, I will think to these moments and I'll be comfortable with the way that we voted, the way that I voted. And what I would love for us as a council is to be similarly proud of how we voted on this. And I want us to give the community clarity and certainty, and the industry clarity and certainty. I want us to be transparent in what we do. And I also don't think that it is radical. I think it is a very modest ask that after 14 years, we say, Minister, can you just please consider that areas of ecological significance in Toowoomba are important and worth saving, because conservation of vegetation is time sensitive. And as I've said before, these opportunities don't roll around. So I urge you, councillors, to vote against this motion and go back to the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Tim, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. We've heard a TLPI is urgent. We've heard from the General Manager that's been put forward without evidence, with very little effect. We're looking at, as Councillor Rebecca said, 16 years this has been on the table, and now we're trying to rush this through. We're looking, the TLPI that has been proposed is looking at 2012 data, 2012 areas of ecological significance, and it came to light last week that we now have new mapping, but this mapping hasn't been interrogated. At this stage, we're looking at developing a TLPI without legal input and without the stakeholder or community consultation, the mums or dads living in the areas of the 2012 areas of ecological significance. If there's a will from Council, I believe we should be using up-to-date mapping. We should be looking, we're in a housing crisis, at housing stock, and we should be drafting this with legal framework and looking at our planning scheme cycle. We're working on a new planning scheme now, and I believe that with new data, we can look at implementing areas to protect our environment. We have to prove that it's desperately needed, and I think we need to look at the areas that are desperately needed within our region and focus in on those. I'd like us to have a look, this has been put together also without consultation of the mums and dads that live within their overlay. They haven't received anything from us, not even a letter. We've had 14 years to put this through, and I believe we're rushing. We were told we could have an input into this in September, and I believe we haven't had the input. This is not saying we're council's against protecting the areas of ecological significance, but it's council brushing something through. I believe that this alternate motion gives us more clarity and certainty. And as I said, we're developing a new planning scheme, and this can continue with this information. Thank you.
Councillor Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll speak against this motion very clearly. The mapping that Councillor Rebecca refers to, I concur, it's been around a long time. In fact, Councillor Rebecca, it's been worked on, I think, since before your time on council. And the notion that there isn't evidence, I'd suggest, and I raised it in question time, it's pretty alarming to me actually that the majority of council can give a directive and the GIS mapping's been around for a long time, And it comes back to a case of what an officer, priority an officer places on the majority of council's voice to say, please, can you develop this TLPI? That concerns me, and not prioritising the tools that are already there. Instead, they come at the last minute. Oh, this mapping's come to light. So that evidence is, I think there's a body of evidence that could have been worked on between when the directive was given and to this date, and it clearly hasn't been. And there was an objection stated by the officer that that was unreasonable. The overlays, state interest, the comment from the mover of the motion, Councillor Tim made a comment that to the effect that it questions state interest and it's possibly at odds with state interest. Well, the state mapping has been around a long time before this government, and it's been in a succession of both red and blue governments in my time in this chair in council. The mapping hasn't changed. So it is a state interest, areas of ecological significance. So let's not get housing crisis, land availability, which are two distinct topics, different topics, and the environment mixed up here with state interest. The mapping already exists. It is state overlays. We're not asking the minister to consider anything really new except prioritise how we can deal with it, the gap between now and a much delayed planning scheme. Because we're asking him to consider those areas of state mapping already and how we treat that. Because I could go back through our records and state multiple times on how the state mapping has been ignored, because in the issues and in the body of the report, the issues and responses, it talks about the planning scheme having absolutely no trigger to protect this vegetation. So we're talking about a state interest here. So all we're doing is we want to line up with the state interest. I don't see what the problem is. I, like Councillor Rebecca, will hold my head high in the room. And next time I see crocodile tears over environmental issues that come to us that we all feel uneasy about because we've got no instrument and availability in our planning scheme to do anything about it, that's where I think we all need to reflect personally on how we deal with these emerging issues, and I'd say more than emerging. My statement before about first things first, any reasonable person would have considered that there would have been prioritisation on working on the evidence to support it between now and this meeting date right now, between when a directive was given via a motion from the majority of council to this date. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. So unfortunately, what we see now is further stalling, and then it erodes away the validity of a TLPI ahead of a planning scheme. Thanks, Chair.
Cool. If I could speak to the floor on this? Oh, no. No? Okay. Tim.
So am I summing up, Chair? There's no more speakers? Yeah. Thanks, Chair. I would like to sum up, if I could. Thank you, colleagues, for the debate. The motion is as it stands. Colleagues, I don't think anyone in this room, in this chamber, is against protection of our vegetation. I don't think anyone is, right? But what we have is in September, a motion was put saying develop a TLPI. My opinion, it was rushed, it was hasty, it was knee-jerk. We've gone and you must develop a TLPI. Well, here it is, and it's sitting before us today. I'm convinced that most colleagues around this table actually don't really know the details of what's in there. It's 2 pages of highly technical legal speak, and we haven't really sought out the ramifications of exactly what that means. And while we're on that, any change from impact to code without legal advice, I would put strongly object to that and ask colleagues to exercise a little bit of caution should we get to that. But we have before us this idea that we want to do a TLPI, yet we don't have the evidence to support the TLPI. Then we have this idea that it's absolutely preposterous to make councils bring their own evidence to support their ideas. No, if you're going to bring a TLPI that has 3 sub-criteria, one of them evidence, somewhere someone has to have the evidence. We simply don't, at this point in time, have the evidence. I will also call out the idea that when we said we passed it, why haven't staff gone and worked on this? And to me, that sounds like we're telling staff that they haven't worked hard enough for our ideas, and I must object to that personally. This idea that you've had 14 years for consultation is completely not true. This TLPI has been on the books for 2 months, 3 months. And in that time, with this TLPI, there has not been any consultation, and I'll stand by that viewpoint. Colleagues, to put a TLPI through, it requires 3 ideas listed in the Planning Act: significant risk, the delay in using this process, and would not adversely affect the state interest. I don't believe that we've done our homework to have the evidence to suggest that we have any data for any of that. And yet we're saying, no, push this through, all steams ahead, keep going. I do take up Councillor James's point that the original motion said to develop, and we were told develop would be come back and we'd work through it and we'd go through it and we'd talk about exactly what we're putting on the table before we do it. Colleagues, none of that has happened. We are full steam ahead with something we don't understand. So therefore, my motion is, colleagues, at this stage, we go no further. We go back, we get our homework done, and we put a report back to councils. We don't come in here and say it's preposterous, it's got to be done right now. Let's get this done properly. Thank you.
All right, I have a mover and a seconder for the motion. All those in favour? Edwina, second. Yeah. Those against? 4. And I'll move on to item 6, the Regional Development Statistics Report. I'll ask Nicola to...
Thank you very much. And just in summary, for the October 2024 figures are above the monthly average and above the numbers for September. It was actually a significant incline. The monthly average is 225 development applications received, whereas October was 328. The October numbers for development applications approved is also higher than the monthly average, which is good to see, and higher than September. Building approvals applications approved are also higher, so this is all good news. In terms of the building approval numbers, they have been fluctuating in the last 24 months. However, there is now an increasing trend line for numbers and also for construction values. The combined value of approved building applications for the month of October, were just in excess of $82 million, and I'm happy to take any questions on the statistics.
Tim?
Thank you, Nicola. I was on ABC radio at about 7:45 this morning with David Iliff talking about the uplift in, well, it's not approvals, it's applications at this stage, but hopefully they flow on to building and plumbing approvals. Is it a December thing? that happens this time every year, or are we in a new climate?
Thank you very much for the question. We do know at the end of year, everyone submits applications. So I think we can have our fingers crossed that we are seeing an incline. However, we'll probably know more next year. If you have a look at table 12, though, you can see that there has been a slight progression. So I think that the inclining trend line may actually hold into next year.
Any more questions? No. Take the report as read. Hoover. Jeffrey, seconder. Melissa. Moved as voted. Those in favour? Everyone.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the Water and Waste Committee meeting of the Toowoomba Regional Council. This meeting is open to the public and will also be live streamed, so I welcome the community as well. I'd like to thank you those in the room today and acknowledge everyone watching via Council's social media channels. I'd like to open the meeting and acknowledge the traditional owners. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, the Guyabal and Jarawar peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. Item 2, the attendance, including apologies, leave of absence and declarations of conflict of interest. Noting the leave of absence for Councillors Carol Taylor and Kerry Shine, no resolution required. At this point in time, I have no declarations of prescribed COI or declaration of declarable COI, but if there is anything that comes up through the meeting, please make me aware and we will deal with that then. Item number 3, closing of the meeting to the public. The reason for the closed meeting, this report discusses the engagement of services required to deliver the Crestbrook Dam Safety Improvement Project, and therefore it is recommended that the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with section 254J3G, negotiations relating to a commercial matter involving the local government for which a public discussion would be likely to prejudice the interests of the local government of Local Government Regulation 2012. The motion that the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with section 254J3 of Local Government Regulation 2012 to consider the following item on the agenda. Item number 4, confidential Crestbrook Dam Safety Improvement Project, extension of the engagement under WT 20-2223 Project and Commercial Advisory Services. Call for a mover. Mayor, Councillor Jeff McDonald, seconder, Councillor, Trevor Mann-Tyfel. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, Wendy. We'll now close the meeting. So we are back in open. The motion before us is Crestbrook Dam Safety Improvement Project, extension of engagement under WT 20-2223 Project and Commercial Advisory Services. The motion that Council 1, adopt the tender consideration plan WT 20-2223 Project and Commercial Advisory Services, delivery phase resourcing as contained in attachment 1 to the confidential report entitled Crestbrook Dam Safety Improvement Project, extension of engagement under WT 20-2223 Project and Commercial Advisory Services, and 2, note the extension of contract services under WT 20-2223 Project and Commercial Advisory Services for the resourcing of the delivery phase of the Crestbrook Dam Safety Improvement Project. I have a mover, Councillor Jeff McDonald, seconder, Councillor Rebecca Von Hoff. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Wendy. I now conclude the meeting of the Water and Waste Committee meeting for December 3rd. Thank you all. I will now call for a morning tea break. All those in favour?
Good morning, councillors. Welcome to the Infrastructure Committee meeting on the 3rd of December 2024. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues in the room, including the Mayor and Deputy Mayor, Acting CEO, Nick Hauser, General Manager Mike Brady, and other staff members and guests. Welcome. Firstly, I'd like to open the meeting and I'd like to acknowledge the custodians on the land in which we meet, the Western Waka, Guyabal and Jarowa peoples and the Bigambul people to our west as well. It's good for us to reflect on how First Nations people were intimately connected and still are to country, and country in the sense of not just part of country, but a holistic connection to country, and that is we understand that connection encompasses everyone and everything around us. And, you know, when we ponder on that thought, it puts us in a different frame of mind, potentially in acknowledging the fact that we are dependent on each other to arrive at an outcome in this boardroom. And that goes for every part of community because we exist together. So I'd like to take a moment for us to consider and reflect on that aspect. And I pay respects to elders, both past, present and emerging, because when we consider those people that have gone before us, and that goes for all of us, our forebears, and the foundations we build on is important for the next generation. So thank you for your indulgence, and I know that's not a traditional acknowledgement of country, but I think there's something in it for all of us. The second item on the agenda is the attendance, including apologies, leave of absence and declarations of conflict of interest. Firstly, we have an apology from Councillor Edwina Farquhar. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Jeff, Councillor Tim, those in favour? That's carried. A noting of leave of absence here, Councillor Carol Taylor and Councillor Kerry Shine. There's no resolution required for that. Declarations of prescribed conflicts of interest, I have nil advised, and declaration of declarable conflict of interest. On my list, there's nil advised. Okay, councillors. Item 3 is the review of the subordinate local law, number 1.5, carrying out works on a road or interfering with a road operation 2020. Councillor Rebecca.
Thanks, Chair. It's actually back in regard to item number 2 and the conflicts of interest. And I believe that there has actually been a conflict of interest declared in relation to this matter previously with Councillor Gardner.
Okay. Councillor Gardner, do you...
Well, I don't see I have a conflict. It's, you know, my interest is no greater or significant than anyone else's in this area. So I intend to stay and participate in this.
I think I stand to be corrected. Through you, CEO, would like to throw to Bailey here. I think it's a matter of declaring and the fact that there's no changes. Am I correct in assuming that? Yes, if you'd like, CEO.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I will speak to that, and you're correct. It's a matter of identifying any declarations previously made, and in relation to this matter in September, I believe there was a declaration made and councillors determined that the councillor could stay, which was correct, but the declaration was made. So I think it's a matter for referring to that. I'm just looking for that declaration and just making sure that I recall that correctly.
It's up to the councillor, isn't it, to declare their declarable conflict of interest or possible prescribed conflict of interest, CEO, acting CEO?
Yes, that's correct. And it's up to the councillor to make that declaration. If other councillors are aware, as you've done, Councillor Von Hoff, to ask for clarity around that. I found the declaration. It's in the minutes of item 12.4. Wendy, on page, commencing on about page 5. Here we are. There we are. Councillor Gary Gardner sought clarification regarding his prescribed conflicts. I could leave that probably to you, Chair, to work through and read through that declaration. Ultimately, it ended in councillors deciding that Councillor Gardner may participate in the decision about the matter at the meeting, including by voting on that matter. For the purpose of today, that declaration ought to be recorded as part of the minutes of today.
Okay.
So, Councillor Gardner, do you want to make that declaration here today?
Yeah, I will. Okay.
Okay. And the circumstances haven't changed, so...
I don't know. I'm not in the day-to-day running, so... But let's record it anyway, so...
Okay. So we'll record that. Councillor Von Hoff.
Thanks, Chair. So that is being recorded, and the question was asked of Councillor Gardner if his circumstances have changed. And can we just get clarity from Councillor Gardner on his answer to that question, please?
Well, let's, for argument's sake, say they haven't changed. Like I said, I'm not in the day-to-day running. I have 1,000 employees. I do not get in the day-to-day running of permits and applications. So, but let's put it up that it's still relevant. So, but I'd like to add, if it was still a running permit, it's based on the old. There's nothing that's been discussed here today that could influence that decision or change it, or I'd ask the council to vote on me staying in this meeting.
Just before I go to you, Councillor Trevor, you want councillors to vote today on whether you stay in the room?
That's what I've got to do. I'm new to this. You don't? Okay. Okay.
If there's no changes,
If Councillor Gardner's saying there's no changes to his circumstances, then there's no change. There's no shift.
Okay. So we're comfortable. Councillor Trevor, you had a question?
I'm just going on what Councillor Gardner says. He has no up-to-date day-to-day running of the business. He doesn't know what it's there. He's a councillor now. Yes, he's the head of FKG, but he doesn't know the up-to-date. And to me, having a man of this knowledge in the room with what's going on here is important.
Councillor Trevor, I think that's off onto a bit of a tangent, but I'd just remind all of us, and I think we're all aware, that it's our individual responsibility to be aware of our runnings, doesn't matter how big or small. There are plenty of precedents at different levels of government where elected officials have got themselves in hot water. So I just want to be clear, that we're we're all on the same page there.
I apologise for running on a tangent, but I've seen tangents in this place before, so.
Yep, thank you. Okay, so we will go back to item 3, and I will hand over to GM Mike Brady to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. Councillors, I'll go through a little bit of the report, won't try not to take too long, and then obviously open to any questions or whichever direction council wants to go. Yeah, in starting there, obviously from September council ordinary meeting, there was a request to review local law, subordinate local law number 1.15. There was a draft presented at the September meeting, and we were asked through the resolution of that ordinary meeting to consider that, as we did, and we also engaged King Co to assist in that review. We did a lot of work in the background in reviewing not only what was provided to council on that day in September, but also what had been done by many other councils in South East Queensland and across Queensland. So that's noted in the report. Councillors, subordinate local law number 1.15 is council's sort of way of picking up on a lot of regulatory elements that we deal with through the Australian Guide Temporary Traffic Management and also our Queensland Guide Temporary Traffic Management. It's a way of council that ultimately, with that information, the MUTCD and other considerations of how it manages operations within the road corridor. And when I talk about operations in road corridor, there's numerous users of our road corridor. We've got developers in the development industry, and they're only a small part of those that use the road corridor, and that the local law 1.1, subordinate local law 1.15 actually applies to. We've got private industry that utilises the road corridor. We've got individuals that utilise the road corridor and need that. We've got government agencies such as TMR and Queensland Rail that we manage their use of our sections of road network through the use of subordinate local number 1.15. With that, with many of those we give approvals, but then we have other agencies, particularly utility providers, NBN, Telstra and Gas, APA. Those government authorities have federal acts that give them certain rights. So in that case, we do letters of no objection. But at the same time, those letters of no objection come with various conditions and that attached. So subordinate local law 1.15, as was presented in recent information session council, comes from obviously the governing acts and then down through, as I said, the regulatory systems of government for us to then manage our operations and the operations of others in the road corridor environment. Today's report, councillors, is a culmination of bringing a lot of information together in reviewing our current subordinate local law 1.15 2020. That's been substantially improved or reduced in conditions. We come back from 45 conditions back to 19, substantial change there. There's a lot of, there's a number of practical impacts of the proposed changes, which hopefully, in their form, will assist with process time. And the report discusses those both from the applicant's perspective, but also from the council's perspective. And ultimately, there's greater clarity and what we think would be an easier way to work through different applications that may come in. We've, as also requested in the motion from September, we have also drafted an application form, and we've made that somewhat more streamlined and easier again for applicants to follow through. The process where we're at today in the subordinate local law making process, the report discusses, and that should council goes through with the resolutions that are indicated there today, the first resolution is required irrespective of any local law that goes through. But then we need to go through a consultation period. The consultation period is determined under council's policy as noted and attached to the report, and that says at least a minimum of 31 days. It is there to give the opportunity for all members of the public to make comment on any sort of local law or subordinate local law making process council may go through. They aren't insubstantial changes. There is a paragraph in that making process that talks about insubstantial changes, but they are substantial changes. What's been presented here today, insubstantial changes refers to if there is minor typos and different other one or maybe one clause difference or one clause change or something like that, not substantial changes that have been made. Our hope from this, councillors, is that if you go through with the recommendations that are there today, that we can progress to that consultation phase fairly quickly and then move into what would then be a consideration of any submissions that would come through that consultation phase. At that point, that gives council the opportunity to review any commentary that comes to them at that point, and that be if there's not much that comes in, obviously it might be able to go fairly quickly from the consultation phase through to council in a report. But if there's a reasonable amount of different submissions, it may require some time to assess those submissions and also give them due consideration. So that may take a couple of months beyond the consultation period, pending actually what comes back. So councillors, the report's there for you to they're tabled there today. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, GM Brady. Councillor Malesi, a question?
Thank you, Chair. Mike, you actually, I think, just answered my question that I had. I just wanted to confirm that if the recommendation is voted on at the ordinary meeting next week, that I wanted to confirm that it goes to consultation. And then once the consultation that period is completed, it comes back to council with that commentary for us to consider. So that's already been answered. So thank you. So in saying that, Chair, through you, Wendy has received some communication and amendment to the recommendation, please. So the recommendation that I'd like to put is to keep number 1 of council's recommendation, delete number 2, and then add number 3 and 4 of what was sent to you earlier today. So the recommendation the amendment to the recommendation I would like to make, and I'll read it, that Council 1 proposed to make the version of subordinate local law number 1.15, carrying out works on a road or interfering with a road or operation 2024, which is identified as attachment 2, and number 2, commence public consultation on the version of the draft replacement subordinate local law number 1.15, carrying out works on a road or interfering with a road or its operation, identified in attachment 1 of the proposed motion presented by councillors at the ordinary meeting of September 17 in, oh, sorry, no, sorry. Can I just change that a little bit? Sorry, I meant to take that out.
If I could, through you,
Yes,
Chair,
sorry.
I wondered if that was your intent,
Yes,
and so
sorry.
we've slightly amended that wording to reflect
I meant to do that.
this
Sorry.
attachment that's provided. Is that what you intended?
So, was to, yeah, sorry, Nick,
you.
sorry. I did,
So, Councillor, I think we may have made those amendments for you if you'd like to
Thank
read
you.
off the screen.
Oh, great.
Might
Thank you.
work.
thanks. Apologies,
but
councillors.
Please let us know if we've misunderstood.
Apologies. I pulled up my wrong sheet. Commence with public consultation in subordinate local law number 1.15, carrying out works on a road or interfering with a road or its operation identified in attachment 2 in accordance with the council's subordinate local law making process, with the minimum public consultation period to be 45 days from the date of the ordinary meeting, to be held on December 10, 2024, in consideration the Christmas New Year holiday period. And number 3, defer further consideration of the proposed application form to reflect subordinate local law 1.15, carrying out works on a road or interfering with a road or its operations 2024, identified in attachment 2.
We hadn't quite got to fix this one.
Thank you.
That might
To allow for public consultation to occur and finalisation of the draft subordinate local law number 1.15, carrying out works on a road or interfering with a road or its operations 2024. Thank you. I move that amended recommendation.
I've got to go, as per meeting protocol, I've got to ask for a second. Councillor Trevor, you want to second that?
Second it, but just need to make a slight alteration there. It says in paragraph 2 or section 2, with a minimum public consultation period to be 45 days, I would take out the minimum. With the minimum, take that out, and public consultation period be 45 days from the ordinary meeting, because minimum just
fair enough.
Skews
it something, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Righto. You happy with that?
Yeah.
David? Righto. So I've got a question myself as to the timing of this. I'm confused. I've got one on the table here and this here. Is this, Councillor Melissa, was this circulated or not? Was this circulated? Okay. So then, Councillor Tim, a question? Yeah. I want to throw, we've got a King and Co, legal advisor here. I want to throw to this gentleman to...
Okay, can I just ask my question?
Yeah.
Councillor Melissa, how are you? The 2 and the 3, so we're going to consultation and then we don't do anything further, but number 1 says we're going to make the version. So...
Well, what we want to do is put the officer's recommendation of the subordinate local law, their recommendation, and then put that recommendation out to community for consultation.
Okay, well, as one reads, it's proposed to, if you scroll up a tiny bit, make the law. Yeah, it's proposed to make the version of it. So that to me sounds like we're signing off on it. Are you okay with that, or is that?
Yep.
Sure.
Yes, because I want to put the officer's recommendation to the community and ask for community consultation on the officer's recommendation.
We've already made the law. What's the point of doing consultation if we've signed?
Because that's what we have to do when you're changing a subordinate local law.
So, councillors, I might intervene here just for a sec. I suspect we might be running into a procedural block here, or some issues we need to take into account, and I'll throw to the officer and the legal representative from King & Co here to bring some clarity here. I really putting something on the table at last minute is a challenge, and we're going to have to work through it.
So councillors, can I just confirm the attachment 2 here is the one that we've got attached to the report? That's what you referred to as attachment 2. So it's the one that the officers have drafted?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'm not changing the officer's recommendation of the subordinate local law. All I was changing from the officer's recommendation is that it goes out for 45 days consultation, whereas you had a minimum or a 31-day consultation, and my recommendation, well, my proposal was to make it 45 days because of Christmas and New Year, and then your recommendation, the officer's recommendation, was also to note the attached draft permit application form, and I just wanted to defer that until we ratify the local law. So I haven't changed your version of the subordinate local law at all.
Okay. Can I just, in regards to recommendation 2, councillors, there's a practical thing here. The actual public consultation's got to go out with formal notice in the newspaper. So it's actually as soon as we can get that public notice in the newspaper. So the actual, it's not inverted commas that we'd start the consultation period as soon as practicable following the ordinary meeting, and then run it for 45 days if that's what you want. So we can't practically run the consultation period from the day of the ordinary meeting.
I'm happy to change that. So just take out from held from the ordinary meeting and put as practicably, or whatever that word is, as soon as practicable.
Yeah.
After the ordinary meeting.
And we've got things happening in the background to hopefully make that happen very quickly, definitely before Christmas is our plan. And can I
I'm happy to change that, Wendy.
And the third one?
So you're happy with number 2, gentlemen?
Yeah. Just with number 3, I'll just confirm. Councillors, I'm happy to defer you noting the application form. The application form is an operational element of what we do, obviously. And council wanted to have a look at that. That's why it's come back to council, obviously. So it was in the report for noting only. So the application form in itself, we're generally improving it, but it's probably wise to wait for any change until you do sign off on the new local law. But
that was my intent, General Manager Brady, was to defer consideration of that until the subordinate law came back after consultation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I would like to hear some comment from our legal representative here. GM, notwithstanding your comments, but he's travelled here, and I just want to make sure that we're clear about...
You're concerned about the procedural issues.
And where we're going. I want to make sure that we are... I mean, there's some statutory requirements around this stuff as well, isn't there?
Well, there is, and you've got a subordinate local lawmaking resolution, and you've got to pass a resolution at the start. And I was a little concerned about making a resolution that amends or repeals a previous resolution, but you're not actually... I don't know that you're necessarily doing that, because if you're going to do it, you have to give 5 days' notice. But in this instance, I don't. Your previous resolution talked about getting independent legal advice, drafting a replacement. Well, you've done that, but it doesn't matter, because if this is adopted, then you're not amending the previous resolution. And the draft permit application, well, you're not mucking around with that either. So I don't think you need to get
concerned about the 5 days notice requirement in the regulation. As to the proposed course of action that's being suggested, the version of the...
Excuse me, Chair, I'm just wondering what the issue is, because I'm not changing, the only thing I'm changing in the officer's recommendation is just extending the public consultation from 31 days to 45 days. And then number 3, I'm just deferring the noting of the application form. So I haven't changed...
I'm terribly sorry.
Thank you.
Terribly sorry.
I haven't changed anything from the officer's recommendation at all. So I'm just wondering what the issue is with the procedural questions.
I asked that as chair because I want to be absolutely sure that we're not going to go around the mulberry bush here, that we're actually going to progress this, because there's a...
Well, that was my intent, to progress it, because that's why I haven't changed
I'll
it.
just give the gentleman here an opportunity.
No, I don't think there are any procedural issues. That looks fine to me.
That's fine. Given that it was put on the table last minute, Councillor Molessa, I want to make sure that everyone around the table is clear.
Certainly, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just, I do need to take us back a step and ask a few questions to the GM and his team, because it still says proposed to make the version of the subordinate local law. And I'm personally not happy with where we've arrived at the attachment to what is making the law. My first question, Mike, if you could help me here, when you say 45 conditions down to 19, if I go to attachment 2, which is the law that we're making as part 1 of the recommendation, can you show me the... So if I go to part 6 of attachment 2, the conditions that will ordinarily be imposed on an approval. Is that the part that you're telling me that there's 19 of them? Because if I go through and fair enough, they're letters, not numbers, there's more than 19, and then there's a heck of a lot of sub-clauses that to me looks like there's more. So can you talk to me about how you got 19 out of that? Because if you count the letters...
Councillor Tim, do you have a page number there?
Yeah, so it's on the board, Chair. It's page 6 of Subordinate Local Law, the 2024 version, attachment 2. 6. So, Mike, is that the conditions there that you're saying there's 19?
Yes. When you take it from across the board, okay, across the whole local law. Yeah, so subsection 1 was already there, part 1. Part 2, you go into, and there was a little change there. There was, we went through this with council the other day. And then schedule 1, you go through those. Okay, it's understanding the makeup of the local law. So section 1, 2 and 3, then the conditions were section 3. Again, those were what were requirements to come in with the application. So they were not, a set of conditions there.
Mike, I'm not necessarily asking about the changes. I'm just saying, like, letters S is...
There's about 3 pages
19th.
less of conditions than what there was in the previous local law 2020.
Okay, 3 pages less. So
3
I appreciate
pages
that.
less.
I'd say there's still more than 19 personally. But my second question is, this was put to us most learnedly at an information session 2 weeks ago, where we went through the details, pardon me, of these changes in very detail. It was an afternoon session, and I remember being, like, I had to focus, but I went away and spent several hours going through the ones I didn't understand, which is most of them. I wrote an email to my colleagues and to your team saying, these are all the conditions I don't understand. Could I please have a comment on them?
Yep.
To my mind, I haven't received
That
a
was
response to that email. Can you
That
tell
was
me where?
sent to you on the...
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw that come through.
Yeah, I'm just
I got an
Pulling out.
acknowledgement email, but
I'm pulling out the email. Just a second, we responded to those. Just let me find the piece of paper. Councillors, 15th of November, Tim, it was 2:27 on the 15th of November, and responded to oh, sorry, it says afternoon Mike and councillors, should have said afternoon Tim and councillors. Oh, well, it was to me as well, but to councillors on the 15th November 2:27, and there was, we took your queries, got Kinco to assist us with review, and then responded, and with the, that came through. I do apologise if got lost in the plethora of emails that we get.
I'm pretty sure I saw it. I don't know about you
okay,
guys.
I apologise. Mine just says in sent emails that I sent it. It doesn't.
Yeah,
In my
the,
thing say response. So I'll have a look at it. Thanks for that, Mike.
Okay.
so that, could I just confirm council Scott, they went to councils at TR, so that was on the 15th of November.
Then
We had 45, we're now down to 19. There were 45 in the previous version of subsection 2. There's now 19.
Yeah.
okay, so while you're having a look at that, I've got a question for from Councillor Gardner.
Yeah, I've got a few questions. Mike, you just said before that I'd like you to cite the exact legislation, maybe you can, that says you need to include existing laws and regulations in.
I'm sorry, I beg your pardon.
Mike made us cite before that the legislation says that you need to include existing laws and regulations in your.
Sorry, you need to
Include existing laws and regulations.
sorry, include or repeal?
Include.
So could
I might move over from that one,
Well,
but
a better example of that would be this reference to the workplace health and safety stuff, where the issue for council officers is there's a scaffolding code, apparently. I'm not an expert in this field, but there's a scaffolding code. And if you're going to do any scaffolding, then you have to comply with the scaffolding code. And you could easily comply with the scaffolding code, as I understand it, and have a situation where, you know, there's a safety issue that arises at a particular road because the scaffolding is installed or put up in a certain way. So the scaffolding code really isn't targeted at road safety, whereas what this subordinate local law is targeted at is road safety. That's, you know, so it's not that council's trying to impose new conditions above and beyond what's in the scaffolding code. The focus is the road safety issue, not the actual scaffolding code, but whether the way the scaffolding has been put up
wouldn't the
and
scaffolding
installed.
code cover that?
Sorry, I beg your pardon?
I would think the scaffolding code would already cover that. You know, it's already part of the code, so why do we need to, like, you know, from what I can see from this, I think we've taken all the conditions and moved them from the application form to the draft subordinate local law. That's what we've done, and I can quote them if you like. Like I say, we're going from application form, moved them all to. I don't see how this is going to be easier or simpler, or like this has been a major concern for the whole community for years and years, and it's been with previous councils the time and the heartache of getting applications for road and footpath closure. It's been previous councils. Then we were told, I think you were told it was state law, and it's not state law, it's our draft laws, and I think we're going down the same path. So And, you know, if I go through this one here, I've marked it up, like it's all, you know, if I go to number 10, you know, it's in operational works. I go to number 11, it's workplace health and safety. I go to 4D, it's a duplication in number 10. I go to number E, it's a duplication in number 11. Like I can go on and on here, and this will all come back in the community consultation, I assume, because people smarter than me will look at it. And if I go to 6E, it's operational works, you know, like if I go to, like you say, you'd followed the other councillors, like they do not reference external legislation or regulations, etc., the TMPPs, the TGSs, the workplace health and safety in their local plans. And here we are, we're filling ours with it. Like, you're creating a bigger nightmare, if you want my opinion. This problem is not going to go away, and
Okay. Just,
I'm finished.
yeah, I'd like a response from the officers or them to be given an opportunity to respond. And then I'll go to you, Councillor Rebecca.
Yeah, look, councillors and I'm just trying to pick up on a couple of examples that Councillor Gardner mentioned there. And you mentioned under Part 3, number 10, the applicant is proposing to undertake prescribed activity utilising open trenching on a road, an engineering report with supporting reasons as to why the road crossing cannot be underbored. So you need to understand, and James can assist here with some further comment, when an application comes in, if we're talking it, say, from a developer, so we can get that from, I've just seen one from a property owner that wants to put a water line under one of our roads out in the rural areas, okay? So depending on the road, the location and stuff like that, we don't want our roads dug up, okay, unnecessarily. So that's number one. That's why we prefer that they all, particularly in the city, that they be underbored, because we all know once you've dug up a road, it's rare that it actually settles down without a bump, okay? So if we can mitigate that, that's one thing we want to do. That said, if we're talking about a development application that comes through, the Planning Act deals with the development application, gives conditions. Then they put in their operational works. The operational works approval deals with the engineering elements of building a road, the pavement thickness, the design, those elements. Then it comes to actually building that, and if they're going to be impacting, so they've got services to bring in, and they've got to bring them from across the road, in the existing road, the Operation Works approval does not necessarily cover off on the temporary traffic management requirements of that or the impacts on the local road. So what we try to do, what we need to make sure from a council perspective is as best as possible to have services and that underboard our road, not trenched across new roads. The last thing we want to do, if we had a development in Margaret Street, is to see trenching across there. The impact to traffic, all those sorts of things is quite considerable. So it's from a public interest perspective that we've got those sorts of things. You mentioned the scaffolding code, and James mentioned safety there. The safety aspect's not safety in respect to scaffolding, okay, or people using the scaffolding. But if it's on the road corridor, we need to look at it from a temporary traffic management. There's certain requirements of prescribed distances that, you've got to have protection to that so that, a motorist doesn't run into it and things like that. So that may impact, the scaffolding might be out into the footpath, but that prescribed distance then may require the protection of those works, that scaffolding works, to be actually placed out into the road reserve. Might mean that you've got to close the parking lane, okay? In some cases, you might have to close half a road. So we need to look at it from that. What does that mean from a temporary traffic management point of view? Okay, so we're not getting involved with how people do scaffolding under the code of scaffolding. We're getting involved with how it impacts into the public realm. Where do the pedestrians go if that scaffolding comes out onto a footpath? You know, where the pedestrian's going to, if you do it in the middle of Margaret Street here, where does it go? So you've got to get, you know, people safely through. You've got to get traffic safely around them. So that's the intent of the conditions that come through our local laws. And what we're asking of a developer, or anybody for that matter, that does something in the road corridor, is, okay, how are you managing that element, that aspect of that occurring on our network? So it's trying to understand that it's not about us trying to tell them how to build what they want to build. It's how they're indicating to them, have they considered certain impacts from what they are looking at building and how they're looking at building that, be it a building or be it a road or whatever element.
So thanks, GM. Look, we're getting into some minutiae of detail which none of us around this table are qualified in. I suffice to say that on a principles-based approach, I would imagine that this council, as the road authority, has a broader responsibility than a site in question where a piece of road is blocked off or footpath. So we have a broader responsibility to the broader community, and it's not just about the site specifics. So, Councillor Rebecca, I'll go to your question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just in relation to what Councillor Gardner was saying about the marked up document that you've got there. And I guess the question is, for us to consider is, are you saying that there's an impact on applicants and getting clarity on what is that impact that you're saying is on applicants? Is it financial? Is it time?
It's time and red tape, and Mike, this has been an issue for years in Toowoomba. And Mike, everything you talked about then's covered in the TGS, I believe. So, you know, and what I'm saying is, all these councils you referred to do not put this stuff into local law, because the regulations change, or you've got to go back and change your local law.
Just before I go to you, Councillor Trevor, I propose that we, unless there's debate on the issue, that I propose we go to the motion, because we will get lost in minutiae here. The consultation period will sort a lot of this stuff out for officers to then bring it back for consideration and have that due process. So that will come from stakeholders within the community across different sectors. So that's the time for us to consider the detail. This is a motion put to us today. GM Mike, are you comfortable that moving forward with that motion, that you've got enough to get about the business of actually moving forward with this?
Yes, and a lot of the queries there, that detail can come through submissions made to council, and we can assess those, and we'll present the submission to council, and we'll present our response to that, the query or the issue that's raised. So council can see it all, and then council can then formalise whether they want to keep that clause or change it or delete it altogether.
Hang on, Councillor Gary. Sorry, Councillor Rebecca, I potentially cut you off there before. Did you have anything else that you wanted to?
I had one other question.
Yes.
But it wasn't about that. So, but with Chair, I just wanted to confirm that the motion that's before us and the attachment number 2, the authors of that attachment have been council officers. Can you confirm that, Councillor Brady?
Yes, with the assistance of King & Co.
Okay, thank you.
So Councillor Trevor had his hand up, and then Councillor Jeff.
I propose we get back to the motion at hand here. We can jibber jab around this room all day about what should be in it and what should be not out of it. It's all going to come back to the 45 days of consultation, and then we'll sit down around this room and go through all the facts and figures and basically what you said, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Trevor. I hear you. Councillor Jeff?
I was just going to move a procedural motion to put the motion to the vote. That's all I was going to move.
Got a procedural motion here. So councillors, we'll go straight to the vote on this motion.
Vote the procedural motion first, that we go to the vote.
Yep.
So
we're voting on the procedural.
we're voting on the procedural motion that goes to a vote.
Okay, so we don't need a seconder for a procedural motion. Councillors, I put it to you, those in favour of going to the procedural motion, that's unanimous. And then
Go to the vote.
we now go to the motion on the board there. Do I have a mover and,
Got that.
mover, Councillor Mel, Councillor Trevor second. Is there any need for debate?
I'd just like to raise some stuff. I don't know if that's debate or...
So do you wish to debate, Councillor Gary?
No, not on the motion, no.
Okay, so we will go then to the vote. Those in favour of the motion as put. That's carried unanimously. Sorry, I probably should have read that out, but Councillor Melissa went to the painstaking effort before. Thanks, councillors. We'll go to the next item, which is closing of the meeting to the public. And the reason we are closing the meeting, this report and attachments discusses matters relating to business for which a public discussion would be likely to prejudice the interests of the local government and contains information that potentially identifies individuals. Therefore, it is recommended that the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with section 25(4)(j) in brackets 3, in brackets E, legal advice obtained by local government or legal proceedings involving the local government, including, for example, legal proceedings that may be taken by or against the local government, and G, in brackets, negotiations relating to a commercial matter involving the local government for which a public discussion would likely to prejudice the interests of the local government of the Local Government Regulation 2012. So can I have a mover, Councillor James, seconder, Councillor Tim, that we go into closed session? Those in favour? That's carried. Yep, that's all of us. Let's go into closed. Thanks. Councillors, come back out into open session. Item 5 is there before us. Confidential drainage matters at Glencoe. The motion I will read out is point 1, that council retain the existing stormwater easement within 3 Linda Court, Glencoe, and remove the unapproved structure within the drainage easement area. Point 2, that the Chief Executive Officer be authorised to negotiate the acquisition of an appropriate stormwater easement from the property as described in the confidential report titled Drainage Matters at Glencoe. Point 3, that if negotiations are successful, the Chief Executive Officer be authorised to sign all documentation necessary to acquire and register the easement interest in the land. And point 4, should easement negotiations fail, no further action be taken by council at this time. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Jeff moves, Councillor Trevor seconds. Any debate on that, councillors? No? Oh, sorry, we would have to. Those in favour? That's carried. Do you want to vote recorded, Councillor?
I'm opposed, but it'll be recorded at the ordinary meeting. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, councillors, CEO, GM and staff, and Bailey, thanks to you. That concludes the committee meeting for the 3rd of December. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, councillors.
We're offline, aren't we?
Councillors, before you go, I've made arrangements to bring forward information sessions. So